Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Shakespeare Hour Live. My name is Simon Godwin, and I am the Artistic Director of the Shakespeare Theatre Company. Well, just for a moment to acknowledge some of the technical difficulties we had last week. I'm so sorry about that. I have personally moved locations from my home in Virginia to Rectortown Methodist Church Hall. I'm very grateful to the congregation for letting me broadcast from there this evening. And I believe we're broadcasting the show on a much kind of higher level of resolution this week than we did last week. So fingers crossed we get through it with no technical hitches. Okay, very good. So look, let's talk about this evening. Before we go on, a few thank yous. Shakespeare Hour Live is a component of Shakespeare Everywhere, which is made possible by the visionary support of the Beach Street Foundation. Additional support is generously provided by Nan Beckley, and tonight's episode is sponsored by Paige Franklin and David Pankhurst. Thank you very much, Paige and David. So now to Titus Andronicus. Goodness me, what an intense, violent and moving play this is. And I'm sure that's also going to reflect on discussion too. We have an amazing panel tonight, many of whom, I think all of whom in fact have been on the show before. So they are returning friends. Let me first introduce, if I may, Dr. Martine K. Green Rogers, a nationally recognized adapter and dramaturg who recently served as dramaturg for the Roundhouse Theatre's Adrian Kennedy Festival. She's associate professor at SUNY New Paltz, and Martine first tuned in for the Shakespeare Hour in November for our episode on the supernatural. Hello, Martine, how are you?
I am super happy to be here to talk about Titus. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's so kind of you to join us again. Let me just straight away ask you a question, Martine. Some of our viewers have been writing in saying, Titus Andronicus, oh my goodness, it's so difficult, it's so challenging. I mean, we don't even like it that much. I mean, are you a friend of the play? Do you think it's salvageable?
Oh my gosh, I adore this play. It's my favorite Shakespeare. I think there's so much richness there, and there's such delicious goodness in terms of thinking about character, in terms of thinking about the use of violence on stage and what that does in terms of both sort of emotionally, but then also in terms of thinking about the politics. I mean, this play is amazing. And it's got the sickest burn of all of Shakespeare-dom in it as well. Like, it's got the sickest burn. And Harry probably actually knows what that is because it was one of his lines. So there's that.
Okay. I think that is such a great opening. I'm already convinced. Brilliant. I'm buying my ticket. Great. Well, let's move on, in fact, indeed, to acclaimed actor Harry Lennox, whose many credits include NBC's The Blacklist and the 1990 film Titus, directed by Julie Taymor. And you may remember Harry from our July episode on Shakespeare and politics. And of course, Harry was also involved in our brilliant virtual gala. So Harry, how are you?
I'm doing well here in New York City, and pleased to be in this august panel, one with my new favorite scholar, and then of course, my favorite director in the whole wide world.
Wow, that is great. Now, I'm imagining, Harry, you're probably also, like Martine, a fan of Titus. Ready to defend it tonight?
I am ready to defend it. You know, it's very interesting. I don't think I really knew much about the plays at all until we started working on this production, Theater for a New Audience in '94. And but what a revelation! It was worth the wait.
Wow. And that was, so you did a production at Theatre for a New Audience that then in some ways went on to the film. Is that right, Harry? So you traveled with Julie from the stage to the screen?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think I'm the only actor that went from the stage play to the film. And so, you know, that's a great honor. But, you know, just watching it or being a part of it from those two productions, I feel like in some ways we unlocked the DNA in many ways, at least from a performance perspective. So, yeah.
Wow, that's really thrilling. Thank you so much, Harry. Thanks so much for being with us. Good. Pleasure. Great. And then Tony Award-winning director Julie Taymor also joins us tonight, whose most recent film, The Glorious, can be streamed online now. Her 1999 film adaptation of Titus remains an iconic production of Shakespeare's play. It's a film that I love, have been influenced by, has really stayed with me in my spirit ever since I saw it. She's, of course, was with us last September for Shakespeare and Film, one of our most popular episodes. And so, Julie, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Can I ask where you're broadcasting from, Julie?
Martha's Vineyard Island.
Okay, wonderful. Excellent.
I've been on the island since August, and I love it through the winter. You know, I've been very lucky to be here through the storms and hurricanes and snow, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Wow, wonderful. A tempest of a kind.
Yeah, well, it supposedly could be one of the islands it was thought of. And also there are a lot of deer everywhere. So today I'm looking at a bunch of does and thinking about Lavinia. So when we get to Lavinia, we can talk about that, the animals.
Excellent. Okay, terrific. Well, again, Julie, many, many thanks for being part of our amazing panel this evening. Let me also introduce Grace Ann, our SC's line producer. Grace Ann, how are you?
Hi, good evening. I'm great. Happy to be here.
Great. And our audience, I imagine, is already showing thoughts about what they think of the play. And
Yes, someone comment from viewer MJR. They're asking if anyone can care to guess what the sickest burn is, picking up on your comment, Martine. So you've already got people thinking.
Okay, that's great. That's already a fun mystery. And of course, last but certainly not least, let me introduce my colleague and co-host, Dr. Drew Lichtenberg, SCC's resident dramaturg. Good evening, Drew.
Good evening, Simon. And I've been trying to think of the sickest burn as well, but this play also has one of my favorite stage directions in the entire canon, which I will spoil now. Enter a messenger with two heads and a hand.
Yes.
Deserves to be up there with Exit Pursued by a Bear in my own personal canon. So yeah, the play we are discussing, the famous or perhaps infamous Titus Andronicus, by many, according to many critics, it's the goriest or most violent play in the canon. Although Hamlet, pretty violent. King Lear, somebody loses his eyes in King Lear. It's not so much that the amount of violence is different in kind in Titus, although Martine maybe it is more violent, but it does seem that it's treated in a different way, perhaps. So briefly, to try to synopsize this play, it opens with Titus Andronicus, a returning war hero, who is asked to choose between two prospective emperors, Saturninus and his brother Bassianus. Titus chooses unwisely. He chooses the Saturninus, the Nero-like Saturninus, and Saturninus almost immediately double crosses him. He marries Taymor, queen of the Goths, who was a captive of war, prisoner of Titus's. He empowers Taymor and her family. Taymor has also taken a lover, Aaron the Moor, who is kind of plotting clandestinely behind Saturninus's and everyone else's back. And the mutilations, the murders ensue from there. In fact, they sort of have already begun before the play begins. And to summarize them here would be an exercise in repeating almost every scene in the play. Perhaps the most infamous scene is the central episode in which Lavinia, Titus's daughter, is sexually assaulted by Taymor's two Goth sons, Chiron and Demetrius. And as in the story from Ovid's Metamorphoses, they cut off her hands and then they also tear out her tongue so she cannot reveal the identity.
May I come and interject something here? Because to me, telling the story that way, Drew, actually heightens that idea that this is gory and grand guignol. And the major story point for me is way before Saturninus is chosen by Titus. It is the point where the queen is brought into the mausoleum and Titus is putting to bed, he's burying his dead sons. And in his religion, his tribe, and we have to think of this in terms of contemporary ideas, of cultural ideas. In his religion, in order to appease the spirits that are gone, the firstborn son of the captive king must be sacrificed, of the captive queen, Taymor, must be sacrificed. This is the beginning of the motor of the whole thing. She begs, Taymor, Jessica Lange in our film, begs for mercy. And then she says three words, which for me is the most phenomenal words in all of the play. When he says he has to do it because it's part of his religion, right? When he has to do this, and she said, I'm a mother like you, your children, my children. She begs as a human being for the life of her child. And he says, no, he cannot. And she watches her child mutilated and killed in front of her. She says, oh, cruel, irreligious piety. And when I read those words, that was it for me. That comprehension of the cycle of violence, the cycle of vengeance, the whole motor of the entire story beginning at that moment, everything comes from that moment. Not, what? What'd you say? Oh.
I think we have some more technical problems. We have a video, we have some audio playing with video, but sorry, Julie, you were saying from that moment on.
From that moment on, the cycle of vengeance begins, you know, that because the rape that happens later that you discussed and the mutilation, that only happens because of what happened to her child. That only happens. It doesn't come out of nowhere. None of the violence, none of it comes out of nowhere. So when we get into this in a deep way with Martine and Harry and yourself, I think we really need to, I have a passionate feeling about why this is the greatest dissertation on violence in the history of any written work that I've ever read or seen, because it is not grand guignol, just violence for violence sake. It actually investigates war, rape, cultural, you know, religious violence, there's like 10 different kinds of violence that is really shown in this play. And, you know, when I read it, when Jeffrey Horowitz from Theater for New Audience gave me this play to read, I'd never read anything that shocked me in my life. It was the most shocking play. I was terrified of it, and that's why I did it. And then, you know, I mean, it's overwritten, and look, in Shakespeare's day, right? In Shakespeare's day, actors who were directors, they cut. These were not meant to be read. So with that kind of freedom in mind, we edited it. We did edit it. And there is a pearl in the oyster. You know, if you do the whole thing, I don't know, there's a lot of messy things that don't necessarily all work, but these plays were not meant to be read. They were meant to be performed. And therefore, the actors, the directors, they made of it, the dramaturgs of the time, they made it what they wanted to say. But I remember very clearly in when I directed it, the Menendez brothers had just killed their parents. Columbine had happened, you know, the shootings in Columbine. High school, first time that we as Americans were dealing with the fact that violence was not just in inner city or by convicts or by drug dealers or by whoever had a reason to be violent, but we're just normal people who for some reason or another, and this is what is so incredible about what happens to Titus himself, is that he is a good general. He is, at that time we were talking about Colin Powell or Schwarzkopf, how we wanted that general to be our leader, our president, you know, and he was tired, he didn't like politics. Same with Titus. But it's how do you go from the sort of most, like if all of a sudden Biden started breaking Ivanka into pies, you know, it's like you've got to imagine Biden, Mr. Empathetic Biden, you know, all of a sudden he takes his enemies and he bakes them into pies. I think that growth of a character, you know, it's the least two-dimensional movie or play I've ever worked on. It's my favorite Shakespeare by miles.
Julie, thank you. I mean, wow, Julie, thank you. I mean, that's I'm hearing Breakdown grappling with the image of Joe Biden eating the pie of his enemies. I
think certainly just to add on to Julie's point, when you look at the violence in our society, when you look at the wars being fought in our name halfway across the world, it's a lot more difficult, or indeed the mass shootings that happen in America every day, practically, or the police brutality. We could take this in so many different directions. And Julie, as you're saying, it's almost on a granular level, the extent to which Shakespeare looks at every gradation of violence in the state.
I thought honor killings, you know, honor killings all over the world. Parents who kill their daughter because she married the wrong guy outside of her religion or outside of her caste.
Right. So it's very difficult to say, oh, this play is barbaric. In fact, in some ways, you could be saying Shakespeare is contrasting the Goths, the barbarians, and the Romans, the quote unquote civilized, and asking who is who. Martine, I see you nodding your head quite vigorously to a lot of Julie's points. I wonder, does Julie's reading the things that attracted her to the play, does that resonate with your interpretation or your teaching of the play, that this play is a kind of exploration on a mind-blowing level of violence in all of its forms in society?
Absolutely. I think that's actually the thing that is the most interesting to me, because it's really, we're talking about revenge violence and how violence begets violence begets violence. And the lightning like happened before the play even begins, completely just sort of infiltrates the entire world. Oh, it's telling me my internet connection's unstable. Hopefully I'm okay. But I'll work on that. But
keep going. We can hear
but,
you great.
And I think that part of it is the part that's really juicy, because we're really getting into the conversations about, you know, how does this legacy of violence, especially when we start to think about violence against women, violence against people who are considered other, foreign, etc. All of that is embedded in this play in a most amazingly disgusting and beautiful way simultaneously, because it really is. It talks about the best and worst of us in terms of how we think about each other and interact with one another and what we do to each other.
Martine, I wonder whether I could ask you just a little bit about the plays, just before we go into the present, as it were, and even into the future. How was it received by Shakespeare? Any thoughts, Martine, on how it went down in the Elizabethan age, or what they made of it?
Yeah, they actually loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was actually right. It was actually the most popular thing they had going on. It wasn't until later on when we started to get into these ideals of like what was acceptable to be seen on stage. It's really not until we get into like the Victorian era, where everything is about like sanitizing things, that it moved away from that, and we saw this ginormous gap in terms of it being on forefronted on our stages. So it's really interesting how the sort of prudishness, or maybe just the inability for us to even confront our own violence,
Yeah, I think
is
so.
the thing that contributed to it disappearing for a little bit from the stage, which is interesting when we start to think about how bloody the time was when it disappeared. Maybe that's the reason why we couldn't handle it then.
Harry, I'm interested in bringing you into this conversation about violence, because of course, as an actor, you have to take something that is kind of an abstract concept, such as violence in society, and render it human, especially playing Aaron the Moor, who has always struck me as such a remarkable creation by maybe the early or the young Shakespeare. It's a remarkably assured villain that deserves to be ranked, in my opinion, up there with the best of the villains in the entire canon. How did you and Julie go about building that character, or that exploratory process?
Well, you know, I come at it from a very perhaps unique point of view. I studied to be a priest for some years before I became a professional actor. And you know, there was something Julie immediately in our first rehearsals in the play, she did something which has stayed with me for a very long time, in looking at violence on film, or even ugly things in theater and drama in general, which is to make it in some way beautiful. And she did that by ritualizing it. And so I think to a certain extent, you know, that idea of the cruel, irreligious piety, and perhaps Shakespeare's reflections on the honor of man, which really is what Titus is about. He disguises it as the honor of God, or the gods in his way, but it's really his own honor and his family honor. It's almost, you know, even though Christianity was around probably at the time of the Goths and this sort of thing, he's clearly not a Christian. And you know, so in any event, I think that it's, for me, even the idea, and Julie and I talked about this very early, I don't think Aaron is a villain at all.
Me neither.
Or if he is,
No.
I mean, he's an antagonist, but he's not a villain. And I remember we were early in the rehearsal process. We had one actor, I can't remember his name just now. I think he was playing Marcus Andronicus. And he said something about, well, basically the good guys are the Andronici and the evil people are the Goths. And I, you know, it was such an antithetical idea to my own that it wasn't, you know, I didn't chafe at it. I was curious that he could actually take that away, being in 1994, that he could think that there were good guys and bad guys in this play. You know, so look, I enjoyed it. And I think that is to say that Julie's idea of making the obscene, the perverse, beautiful in some way that is receivable, that you don't avert your eyes, but you're compelled to look at it to this precise practice of ritualization. Even in the Catholic Church, in the Mass, of course, we're eating Jesus's body, it says, drinking his blood. How do you
underneath a
ritualize
crucifix? People sleep under a crucifix, the most disgusting, violent image in the world. And they give it to little kids and they wear it around their neck as jewelry, you know?
And perhaps that's a humanly, psychologically healthy thing, that is to say that that's a part of the life process. But yes, I mean, so that's how I accept it, that Lee Marvin says, no bad guy, as it were, thinks he's a bad guy. This guy's trying to survive. He has no love for these people. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I just want to say that because, again, you've got Titus and you have Aaron, and they're sort of on the scale there. And Titus starts because we accept that he's the good guy, But when we get to the end of the play, he's Aaron. You know, he's the one who has figured out, I'm not just going to kill those boys. I'm not just going to kill them because I'm mad at them. I'm going to bake them into pies and feed them to their mother. That's an Aaron artistic thing to do. Now, Aaron is artistic because he's Black, because he's the other, because he's outside, because he's immediately thought of that. And it's how he's been able to operate. It's his power. But by the end of the play, this is the man, the fully human man who is willing to sacrifice himself for his child. So he becomes the good guy. He becomes the one who we see as fully human. We understand because Shakespeare has shown us the hideous racism. This play is astounding. There is no other. I mean, to Othello, Iago is more like Aaron. Yes, he was Aaron may have been the model, but I really feel that Aaron is much more interesting and complex for me. In his relationship and how he's been able to maneuver in this early Shakespeare. I feel like another reason why I think this is such genius, this early Shakespeare, is because he is unabashed. It's his first work. It's his, you know, like Quentin Tarantino's first. When I showed this to some of those guys who do all those Hollywood, like Tarantino and all these guys who are making those films, they were utterly gobsmacked. They couldn't believe this play, because it went way beyond all of our violent, you know, titillating violent films now. And with its depth, with the depth of every single moment. We should probably show that?
No, I would love that. I mean, I think, Grace-Anne, we have some footage, which maybe, Grace-Anne, you could introduce. And if there are already thoughts from the audience that you'd like to bring into the discussion, Grace-Anne, please do. And then we'll watch some of the footage and come back to our guests to chat a bit more after that. Grace-Anne.
Sure. So we have two videos. We have one from stage to screen video, which has a lot of footage from the film and is kind of an overview, some of what Harry and Julie, what you've talked about, starting with the play and how that journey from the play to the film. We could show that. And we also have some rehearsal footage. Where'd you like to start, Julie?
I think the overall, so you get a lot of images, right? Yeah.
Yes, let's do the stage.
I hope we're not too repetitious. I just thought about that, but
no, it's great. It'll be good to put a visual to a lot of what we discussed. And so this video is about 6 minutes long. So everyone enjoy.
There greet in silence as the dead are wont.
And sleep in peace, slain in your country's wars.
When I did it in the theater, I had a gold frame and a red curtain. That was the literal framing device. The idea of violence as entertainment. What are you going to do in a film? Are you going to put a gold frame around the frame of the... It's already framed. The framing device in the film was the Colosseum. Locations, scenic design, for me, have to be mirrors of what is going on in the internal landscape of the characters.
Brave fathers, Be pitiful to my condemned sons, whose souls are not corrupted as 'tis thought.
The crossroads, I put people behind all of the columns and they just moved. When I went to the film, I went, all right, well, I'm not going to have columns moving. They're people, but I don't want to see faces. The idea is still the same. He's a salmon moving upstream. They have no personality.
Be pitiful to my condemned sons, whose souls are not corrupted as 'tis thought. For 22 sons I never wept, because they died in honor's lofty bed. For these tributes in the dust I write, my heart's deep languor and my soul's sad tears. Let my tears staunch the earth's dry appetite. My son's sweet blood will make it shame and blush. Ah!
Now, go tell, and if thy tongue can speak, which was the cut thy tongue and ravished thee.
And if thy thumbs will let thee play the scribe.
I wanted to deal with the violence on two levels so that you don't become numb by the elegant beauty of the stylization and you don't become numb from the visceral reality, which is what we do on television. I did a lot in the theater where things were in gold frames. They were portraits of moments that I called penny arcade nightmares. Now, I did those also in the cinema very differently.
I am revenge, sent from the infernal kingdom, accompanied by rape and murder here, to ease the gnawing vulture of my mind.
And for thy hand, look by and by to have thy sons with thee. Their heads, I mean. Oh, how this villainy doth fat me with the very thoughts of it. Let fools do good, and fair men call for grace. Aaron will have his soul black, like his face.
Oft have I digged up dead men from their graves and set them upright at their dear friends' doors, even when their sorrows almost was forgot. And on their skins, as on the barks of trees, have with my knife carved in Roman letters, let not my sorrow die, though I am dead.
We'll find a day to massacre them all.
I love this play. I love it. I love the truth of the play, but I can't stand the reality of the play. So I took the young boy. He starts as an innocent, then he becomes a participant. He saw the horror. It's his family, it's his blood, and yet he's made a choice now, this 12-year-old boy, to leave the killing field. I didn't want to tell the story if I didn't have that one sliver of hope.
So we've been chatting during this watching this amazing montage. And Martine, you were chatting with us about Aaron the Moor as we were watching.
Yes. So Harry and I are having a great, lively conversation about whether or not Aaron is a villain, because I actually reject the notion that he's a villain. But part of the reason why I say that is because in the end, he was doing what he needed to do to survive this scenario. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not sure if if he wasn't a prisoner, if he wasn't, in this sort of circumstance where now he's trying to figure out what he's going to do about this child that has been born, all of these things, I think, granted, maybe some of this brought out the worst of machinations, and because Harry actually brought up a really great point, which is, Harry, I'm gonna hand it to you for your point.
Well, thank you. That's a good cue up right there. I think that he is certainly a man of survival and instinct and cunning and so forth. But it's very interesting in the first time he speaks, he talks about, I will be bright and shine and pearl and gold to ride with this, so to some extent he sees this as a tool for advancement, in addition to the fact that he is doing this to survive and he doesn't have any loyalty there. So anyway, I was just pointing that up, that Kant always talks about, or at one point talked about the categorical imperative, this part where he says that that morality, any ethical decision, is the choice of duty over desire. Mm-hmm. And I think to some extent, sometimes those two things collide. And I think Aaron both has a duty and a desire to cause as much trouble as he can, and delights in it.
Well, and it speaks to the point that, Julie, you were making earlier about the relativism, the extraordinary relativism of Shakespeare, where Aaron and Titus essentially change places by the end of the play. Titus begins as the patriarch caring for his family, and by the end, he's the Machiavel orchestrating revenge and murder and violence. And Aaron is the paterfamilias by the end of the play, who is proud and willing to die for his family. And seems like ethical duty is in conflict with personal desire in this really radical and very complex way throughout the play. And Shakespeare is continually challenging our binaries, our definitions of hero and villain and civilized and barbaric, of insider and outsider in the play. Is that right?
Well, I think the racial thing is also, it's not just villain, but what do we call it? What did you call it? Paternal.
Paterfamilias, the father of the family in Latin.
But the greatest writing, right, Harry? The greatest writing on the color of skin is in this play. And Harry, maybe you can do it. We don't have the clip, but when Tamara gives birth to their child, to Aaron the Moor's child, to their child, she, without even thought, says it should be killed. I mean, it's not even remote. There's no way this interracial child is going to survive. It's not going to. And then the two sons of Tamara say the most astounding things. And I think Aaron has two sections of the greatest language about blushing, that one, Harry, and the best one is, oh God, what is it? All the water in the world. Will you do them?
If memory serves, but yeah, it's something like, coal black is better than another hue, in that it scorns to bear another hue. For all the water of the ocean could not turn a swan's black legs to white, although she laved them hourly in the flood, right? And then he says something about this, in spite of all the world, talking about his son, he says that he'll burn down all the world to save this boy. And I mean, you got these Black Panther movie out now and that, but that is the most, in my view, the most pro-Black speech.
It is. It's absolutely. And that's why I think that people have not investigated this enough about this Shakespeare play, that there is no other play in the canon that deals with race in this way, and in a way where because Aaron is a modern man. Aaron is we at the time, I remember 20 years ago using the word nihilist, and that one feels that he sees like when he's buried. There's the other great lines when he's buried. If I have done one good thing in my life, what is it? I do regret it.
Repent it from my very soul.
He's a modern character, who really understands the darkness of humans, and therefore with just a little touching here and there, he can unlock the worst in humanity. And it's his position, it's his outsider position that allows him to see so clearly. And I have that strong feeling now in our culture now. I think that the Black point of view of how, because of the limits, has been able to see a much wider perspective because of the position that African Americans have been in for so long, that they've seen it from an overview. It's really fascinating to rethink this whole play now. Yes, Simon?
Well, that's a great
oh, sorry, Drew.
No, go ahead, Simon. I was just going to transition you.
I was just going to go live to Grace Ann in case there's so many interesting points that are being raised. I just didn't know whether our audience, Grace Ann, wanted to come in with any thoughts on that. And then after that, I might, if I may, on a much more mundane level, just give a little information notice, which I shall do after you, Grace Ann. And any thoughts from the audience?
Sure. So I have no questions for the group. I do have some thoughts about the movie, though, Julie. Some folks have a question specifically about the film, just quickly before we go to Simon. So one comment from viewer Renia Brown, she just says that Aaron will have his soul black like his face. That's her favorite shot in the film, as well as Jessica Lange's direct address. So I'm glad that both of those were included in our 6-minute clip just now. And then there's a question from viewers Suzanne and Gary, and it's maybe a little bit of a different vein than we've been discussing here tonight, but they wonder about the blue face paint that's so consistent throughout the film, if that obviously has historical precedent, but it also reminded them as Lord of the Flies too.
It's not in the film at all. It's in the poster. It's not blue. They're actually, the opening of the film, the concept was, because this is a blend, a collision of time, it's ancient Rome, it's Mussolini's period, and it's the present, year 2000 or whatever, around there. When the armies come back from the wars, when Titus comes in with his treasures and everything, they can come in on motorcycles and chariots and horses. And I needed a common denominator to make the time one time. So I covered everybody and everything in clay. And it was inspired by the terracotta warriors of China. I said, okay, we're going to take them out of the ground. And so, I mean, Harry, you remember, Harry was freezing naked. This is the cruelest director in the entire world because it was freezing in Croatia. That's where the Colosseum was. And in winter—
I'm from Chicago, Julie. I'm from Chicago. I was okay.
Okay, it was January. But Titus, Anthony Hopkins and Jessica Lange loved it. So when your two leads get it, when they get, okay, they're willing to put up with the cold. But the idea was they were all in clay. The blue turned blue because the guy who took the photograph of Hopkins, he did it in his color correcting thing. And we kind of thought it was cool, but it's really not blue.
Good. Well, that's one of the great mysteries of cinema resolved. Look, just quickly, folks. I just want to announce a few future spring episodes tonight because we're going to be having a break in April, but we're back in May, and we're going to be doing episodes on the sonnets, on training programs for Shakespeare, on the extraordinary full staff, hero or villain, and on Shakespeare's final plays. So you can check all of that out at the SCC website. Back to you, Drew.
You know, Julie, while we were talking about the film, I've always wanted to know also about the mix of architectural styles, because it looks like there's a kind of post-Soviet brutalist skyscraper, which maybe was found in Croatia.
It's Mussolini. So this is very interesting. Dante Ferretti, the very famous production designer who did Fellini's works, many Fellinis and many Scorsese's. I was very lucky. It's my first feature film, and I asked him to do it. And we originally, I had wanted to do this film in Vegas. I wanted to do it in the Roman Forum. And, you know, I had an idea that the little Lucius lived in a trailer on the outside of the city. And anyway, so Dante said to me, have you seen the Colosseum, Mussolini's Colosseum? I said, no. He said, before you go that direction, come to Rome. And he took me around to the Baza Caracalla, to all of the ruins. Now, at the same year we did Titus, I think that Spielberg did, was it Spielberg? No, it wasn't Spielberg. Did Gladiator. Who did Gladiator? Who directed Gladiator?
Spielberg.
No, it was Ridley Scott.
Ridley Scott. Okay, so Ridley was going to revitalize the Colosseum with blue screen and lots of money and this and that. And it's not because we didn't have enough money, but as soon as I got to Rome and I saw the stratification of time, the layers, I went, well, that's what Shakespeare's done. Shakespeare combines Greek myths with Roman plays, with Elizabethan, and I felt that that the way the Colosseum and the way the landscapes and the way the original architecture worked, the ancient architecture, that was Titus. Saturninus felt like a Mussolini character. So you see the designs in the clothes. Belena Canaro did the costume designs. I had this unbelievable Italian crew. So the notion was that the architecture and the costumes reflect the characters. So you see Titus in the armor in the beginning, but as you move, he starts out black, I think, isn't it? Yeah, he starts out in black clothing and moves to white. By the end, he's got the white chef's cap, you know, contemporary chef's cap. And he goes into a gray kind of sweater. When he loses his power, he's in a kind of avuncular, poor guy, lost it all with his family. And so the costumes and the architecture were the real thing there. And I didn't feel like when I was outside of the Colosseum in Rome and there would be these tourist things, you'd see little toys of G.I. Joes and Roman soldiers. So the opening of the movie, of course, is our little Lucius, and he's in a kind of quintessential 1950s, 1960s kitchen. Could be, as I've said, Brooklyn, says in the script, it could be Brooklyn or Sarajevo. And Sarajevo was on our minds back then. It was a big part of what was going on. So I had the opening of the film, the bookends. The opening of the film is with young Lucius with a brown bag over his head and two eyes and a hole. And he's playing with all these toys, with Star Wars, with G.I. Joes, with Roman soldiers, with ketchup. And he's conjuring up war with ketchup and bombs going. And lo and behold, what he conjures starts to happen in his kitchen. It's the walls start to shake until it actually is a bomb that goes off. And the clown, the Shakespearean clown, grabs this terrified child. The brown mask comes off. He's like God with the brown mask, but the mask comes off and there's this crying boy who's now a director in New York. And I met him on the Vineyard this summer. He's our little Lucius is a grown-up director. Anyway, that's how long ago it was. And he's in the Colosseum. I play with an Alice in Wonderland notion that this child is going to learn about tribal violence and vengeance, family feuds and violence. He starts out quiet, but as we know, this young Lucius character, even in the Shakespeare, he starts to speak during the play, somewhere in the middle of the play, and becomes active in the play. And then in this version, in the film version, of course, I don't end it the way Shakespeare ended it. I end it differently. You have to see the movie. But you can't see the movie.
In my opinion, the movie comes closer in its visual language to what Shakespeare was actually like to experience in the 1590s. There's the famous Peachum drawing of Titus Andronicus. And everyone says, oh, they're wearing different periods of clothing and it's completely anachronistic. But that is what Shakespeare was like to experience in the theater. Simon, you had a point you wanted to make.
No, so actually, I'd love to hear a bit on Martine, a bit from on Shakespeare's eclecticism, because I'm sure that's right. And then after that, maybe there's time for a little further extract. But I think, Julie, that there's some shots of some rehearsals from the film of folks, maybe even Harry doing Shakespeare.
We also have an interview with Anthony Hopkins.
Wow. So he could be a spiritual guest tonight in one way or another. But great. So I think that's all to come shortly. Martine.
Yeah, I think one of the things to always be discussed is how much of that sort of anachronistic eclecticism that we were just talking about is also buried in the fact that he might have co-wrote it with someone. Like how much, and especially considering the work that is, now I'm forgetting his name, last name Peele, George Peele?
Yeah, George Peele, the author of The Arraignment of Paris.
Right. And so I wonder, you have to start thinking about how much of that is embedded in this world and in this text. But I think one of the things that is so fascinating to me is that it's early Shakespeare. and you know, getting back to Julie's point earlier, you start to see sort of these prototypes of what we will eventually see come to pass in later Shakespeare's. And I think that's also part of the reason why this play has always been so fun and juicy and fascinating to me, as someone who has spent, you know, my life dramaturging Shakespeare's. I feel like I always end up coming back to the early Shakespeare's to really understand what is the world, what is the craft that Shakespeare is creating, and like, where is that trajectory? Because when you look at Titus versus when you start to get into some of the later stuff, like Cymbeline, like, let's just be honest, Cymbeline is like every random idea that Shakespeare had thrown back into a pot, stirred together, and then like thrown against the wall to see what sticks. Like, I find this sort of early experimentation exciting. It's almost like, because I also do a lot of new play dramaturgy, and I think it's almost that the cracking some of those early Shakespeare's is the same as like cracking what early Shakespeare was thinking about.
Yes,
and
it's uncensored.
Yes.
I think what's important is that it's the young artist uncensored. He's putting out there everything he sees and feels. There were bear baiting. You know, we were talking about what's going on. There were hangings every day, executions. You want to get people to come and see your play? Let's really talk about violence, but let's do it on a deeper level. But he did have to make it so that he could draw the audience, you know, there. But I really think that there's a point. I even feel it's my first feature film. I don't think I could do that again. I have to be honest. I don't feel the kind of, you know, self-assuredness or bravado or whatever in a certain way. I mean, I had done the play, so there was certain security about my experience, but there is something where your first time, you see this with people's first works, you know, first films, first books, first anything, that there is, I'm going to put it all out there. And I think it's not a history play. We just have to remember it's a poetic piece of writing. It's not meant to be real. So it is real in that that's real emotions, but it's not history.
And Julia, I'm also reminded of the journey of stylization. I mean, I didn't see it, but 1955, I think it was Peter Brook's production with Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier, where, as I understand it, Lavinia, when she had her wrist cut off, walked on stage in red ribbons,
right,
from her stumps. And I suppose that was that very, feels like a very moving first gesture towards the ritualization.
Definitely. The Japanese style of putting, I mean, I did it too in the theater. I had a more of a Buto looking, you saw a moment, and her mouth, once her tongue was cut out, it had a red line here. And we had the twigs. I put her on a stump, you know. I don't want to take up too much time with that. Do we have time to show?
We do. So actually, I'm going to go via Drew to Grace Ann. I think we have 6 minutes of behind the scenes footage. So Drew, and then Grace Ann. Drew.
No, I was just going to set up the video. Let's hit play, Gordon.
Notice them.
Let him that thinks of me so abjectly know. This gold must coin a stratagem, which, cunningly effected, will beget a very excellent piece of villainy. And so repose. I was thinking maybe there, like, because it's a rhyme, should I like do kind of a sing-songy thing? But so repose, sweet gold, for their unrest, that have their arms out of the emperor's chest. Like, but more,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Can you kiss the gold too before you put it to bed?
Of course. Yeah.
Good night. So if you want to do it like a bedtime, you know, like a lullaby, is that right away? Right. Okay.
Really, it's more like a stage production. I mean, because in film, you almost never have this kind of, and I don't want to use the term luxury because it should just be a given, but in film, you never have your rehearsal time like this. Most of the time, actors come into a scene without ever having, like, run the scene with another actor.
And so repose, sweet gold, for their unrest, that have their arms out of the emperor's chest.
My lovely Aaron, wherefore look'st thou so sad? When everything doth make a gleeful boast. The birds chat melody in every bush.
Like, I'm just wondering, Jessica, if instead of him being standing, because, you know, that it maybe in the beginning, if you look, if you get up and it's her, you know, okay, so what does she want? And so he's down like that for a moment, so that she can just kind of play around you a little bit more. I think it helps with, it's hard when he's so tall and up there.
And it's kind of,
and then,
this would probably be more
then you can really go around him. You might even be able to kind of, you know, sit here and then take the pin out, right? And
now I'll do that.
Thank you. And then pick her up, you know, maybe you,
should I something?
I don't know. Let's see what you guys do.
That have their arms out of the Empress' chest.
The birds chat melody in every bush. The snake lies rolled in the cheerful sun. The green leaves quiver in cooling wind. Under their sweet shade, let us sit.
Now, this was the question of whether, you know, he's up there and whether there's a way that you can like either wrap your foot around his head and pull him down.
Well, see, I was thinking of doing that, except with those boots, it's going to be kind of...
So why don't you pull him down on top and just like be in her ear saying, "Though Venus govern your desire," and then get back up again.
Each wreathed in the other's arms, our pastimes done, possess a golden slumber.
Of course, you don't have the extent of the language like you do in this, too. I mean, it feels like for me, I can't speak for the other actors. It feels like I haven't scratched the surface yet.
Kind Rome, that has preserved the cordial of mine age, to glad my heart.
How happy art thou then? From these devourers to be banished. Who comes with thy brother Marcus here?
Good. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Come, let me see what task I have to do. You heavy people circle me about, that I may turn me to each one of you, and swear unto my soul to right your wrongs.
I don't think Titus is mad, and he's not a monster. But what happens to him is monstrous. And he becomes close to madness, madness of grief. He stares into the pit of horror. And then he coldly, calculatedly, by actually playing the antic of madness, destroys his enemies. His super objective becomes revenge, vengeance, to wreak revenge. That's his objective, a la Stanislavski. I'm fascinated by the depths of these characters, because they're there. They were written by a great genius. I have a very bleak outlook on life, but I'm very happy. But I do perhaps have a perception of life which is bleak, that life is hard, that the world is hard. It's a tough, hard place. And there's something in my nature responds to that hardness in a triumphal sense, I think, because life is hard. And in that, there is a great comfort for me. Maybe it's a Sartrean world I appreciate. If there is a God, then it's either a big joke he's played on us all. And if there is no God, then one day it'll all be over and that'll be the end of that, and there will be no more pain or suffering. Like Titus when he addresses the tomb which houses and stores his dead sons, his 25 sons. His one wish in one very short speech is, I wish I was with you. There's a world weariness about him. And he's an older man.
Hear me.
He's my age.
Hear me.
I have no illusions. Titus has no illusions.
But yet let reason govern thy lament.
Yeah, it's extraordinary to hear Sir Anthony Hopkins talk about the Sartrean cosmos of this play, which resonates with so many of the themes we've talked about tonight on the Shakespeare Hour. And also, I think, to see Harry, you rehearsing in such an intimate way, you know, in such a careful way with Julie and with Jessica Lange. I wonder if that stirs up any memories for you.
Well, a great many, although I think that Hopkins should have quoted Nietzsche instead of Sartre, but you know, I'll put that out there. But, you know, I would say that I felt really like an aide to Julie, that is to say, almost like her assistant, because I had been in the play and I knew the way that she worked. So I felt in many ways that I could sort of just be a model for her, you know, that she could use me to sort of position me. We have this great comfort. And so I felt really my kinship with her in that moment, working with the great Jessica Lange and the great Anthony Hopkins. So that was really an anchor. And, you know, it was what a wonderful, heady time to be in Rome, a whole new city, doing this ancient play with a cast that was international instead of a bunch of New Yorkers, which we had done on stage. And it was, you know, so in a way I felt like I was bringing with me the code of behavior and conduct. So yeah, I mean, it's a great memories.
Mm.
Yeah, and you know, as you were saying before we went live, Julie, it's tragic that this play is not, this film is not streamable easily. It's not easily attainable in our new era of digital media, not physical media. Us lucky few who have the DVDs have it to watch, but it's not out there the way it should be.
Well, we'll try to get it. I mean, I've got people who are looking into it, but I was just, when I saw that clip with me and Harry, I thought, you know, Simon, as a director, I would never be able to do that now.
That's true.
Never. The kind of physical director that I was in that scene, yeah. I don't think that would be harassment, right, Harry?
That's true.
It was so interesting. We were just completely free.
Yeah. It was a lot better time in my view. Even this world that we had, where, you know, there was a kind of freedom, as you said, you know, it's all going away, and I think it's to the detriment of the art.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, Titus. If there's nothing else to take away, it's that this is Shakespeare in some ways at his freest, most radical, most experimental, most imaginative, most daring, most relativistic, most complicated, most Nietzschean, most Sartrean as a writer. You just want to pile on the hyperbole, but this play deserves it because it is a remarkable piece.
Well, yeah, we didn't even get into rape, revenge, and murder, the characters. You know, we didn't even get into how they dress up as those, you know, as those beings. It's unbelievable. It's just so rich. I think it's rich. I mean, the 1955 one, apparently, of course, I didn't see it, but he even whitewashed that a little bit. I think there was a little bit of fear of the violence there, that maybe it was a little more ritualized to make it palatable for those audiences.
It's interesting, Julie, you're using words such as rich and palatable. One might say befitting a pie, a rich composed pie. And with that terrible joke, Simon, I give it to you to wrap up.
Always welcome, Drew. Well, look, next week, as we pray for warmer weather, we're going to be addressing the question of Shakespeare and the environment with Sir Jonathan Bate, Foundation Professor of Environmental Humanities at Arizona State, one of the great Shakespearean academics working today. Scenic designer Susan Hilferty, whose productions, she's designed wonderful shows at Shakespeare Theatre Company stages, amongst many others around the world. And Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival Artistic Director Davis McCallum. Anyway, they'll all be with us to talk about Shakespeare, the environment, and our greatest writer's relationship to the natural world. My thanks to Martine, to Julie, to Harry for an incredible discussion. I certainly think we've resolved the question, is Titus Andronicus a good play? Yes, yes, and double yes, triple yes. So I'm off to dream of a production. Thank you for making tonight possible. Thank you, Drew, to Grace Ann, to Gordon, AV Supervisor, and most of all, to all of you for watching. Thank you. Good night, and see you next week.